Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Black students are often subject to harsher discipline at schools than white students, and those punishments can damage students' perceptions of their school and negatively impact their academic success years later, according to research published by the American Psychological Association. Researchers previously analyzed 3 years of school records, including disciplinary data and grade point averages for 2,381 6th, 8th, and 10th grade students from 12 schools in an urban mid-Atlantic district in the United States. Of the students, 818 were Black, 1,563 were white. The researchers also surveyed the students each year about their perceptions of their school's climate, such as whether they felt they belonged at the school and whether they felt that school rules were consistent and clear. Overall, the researchers found that 26% of the Black students received at least one suspension for a minor infraction over the course of the 3 years, compared with just 2% of white students. Minor infractions involved such things as dress code violations, inappropriate language, or using a cell phone in class. The researchers also found that among Black students, those who were suspended for a minor infraction during the first year of the study had significantly lower grades both 1 and 2 years later than students who weren't suspended. They also found that the relationship between suspensions and grades were mediated by the students' perceptions of their school climate. In other words, teens who received minor infraction suspensions were more likely to report an unfavorable school climate 1 year later, which in turn predicted lower grades 1 year after that. Now, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights and the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division have jointly released a resource on confronting racial discrimination in student discipline. The department said they recognize and appreciate school administrators, teachers, and educational staff across the nation who work to administer student discipline fairly and to provide a safe, positive, and non-discriminatory educational environment for all students, teachers, and other educators. They said the resource demonstrates the department's ongoing commitment to the vigorous enforcement of laws that protect students from discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin in student discipline. The resource provides examples of the department's investigations of such discrimination over the last 10 years, reflecting the long-standing approach and continuity in the department's enforcement practices over time and the continuing urgency of assuring non-discrimination in student discipline in our nation's school. Here to talk about all of that is Tyler Whittenberg, the Deputy Director of Opportunity to Learn for the Advancement Project's National Office. Tyler, that's a mouthful and then more, but welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Look, Tyler, listen, the big question is, will this resource do much to curb long-standing discriminatory practices in our nation's schools?
I would say the short answer is no, which is probably not surprising to your listeners. But it is a good faith demonstration that you have people in the administration that are accepting complaints and are actually following up and conducting these investigations, and that you have enough pressure there for school districts to agree to try to remedy some of their discrimination.
Yeah, and so I just gave some stats, but there are plenty of stats out there that show the discrimination of students of color, particularly Black students. And we also see, Tyler, in that that I read earlier, we see how that discipline affects grades,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So naturally, it affects graduation dates. It
Right.
affects a lot of things there. So now we begin, Tyler, and perhaps you can speak to this to see why there is this educational divide.
So it really does mirror the criminal justice system or the criminal legal system, rather, when we look at schools, time and time again, since the beginning of this term, the school to prison pipeline, we've been able to identify that Black students in particular and Black girls especially are more likely to be suspended, expelled, and referred to law enforcement. Whether it's exclusionary discipline, meaning removal from the classroom, or it's actually being funneled into the justice system, all of these situations come with collateral consequences that make it more likely that the student's not going to finish out that year, that more likely that the student enters the youth legal system or the adult legal system, less likely that they'll even finish school. And there's even long-term earning impacts for students for the simple fact that they are suspended at these early ages. And the research demonstrates that Black students are being suspended and expelled and referred to law enforcement for behaviors, the exact same behaviors as their white students, except the white students aren't receiving those same consequences. So it's blatant bias.
Yeah, I read something too, Tyler, that really caught my eye of the many things I've been reading in preparation to and speaking with you. And now I'm trying. I think it was Brigham Young University or another school in which they did a study, and they sat in on classes in different schools, and if something went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and there were white students and black students in the vicinity, they talked about the eye test,
Mm-hmm.
how the teacher's eye would automatically go to the black student. Black kids, the parents certainly, I'm sure many parents are aware, but I think the students are probably aware of this. And if they are aware of this, whether or not they're aware of it, but how much more does that weigh on a black child, male or female, when they are going to school? That something goes wrong, they're gonna automatically look at me.
Absolutely. Well, for one, they all the students I've spoken to know this to be true, but both adults and those in power around them view Black students as older, as less in need of support, as more culpable when something happens. And what this means is they're going to get the harsher punishment, thinking that if we spare the child of this punishment, they won't learn. This idea that Black students need to be controlled and intimidated through punishment and exclusionary discipline really mirrors a lot of the racist pathology that we see throughout our society. But the real damage there takes place in the psyche of the student, I believe. During adolescence, we're learning how to control our emotions, we're learning our identity, we're learning about our own concept of fairness. We're developing our own sense of relationship with the government, with those around us. And if we're constantly treated in a way that we know is really discriminatory and it's just simply not fair, then how else are we supposed to encourage a youth to enter civic engagement, to participate, to really care if they know that really no matter what I do, I'm going to be targeted for something and be treated differently than those around me. So it really has lasting impacts on them socially, economically, and academically, of course.
What does a parent do? What does a black parent do? I still have a couple school age kids, but I want to ask you that question. What does a black parent do to prepare a black child for this atmosphere that we see?
I think my parents did a great job of showing us how to stand up for one another, um, and teaching us really how to speak out when we see something wrong. And I think if Black parents can organize one another and really stand together, uh, a lot of changes will continue to happen because we are seeing a lot of parents come together and fight back against a lot of attacks, whether they be the statewide attacks on curriculum or the individual attacks against their students. But it really comes down to organization and the parents coming together and demanding and accountability when these things happen, and clear lines of communication. This report, the federal investigations outline the lack of accountability, or even the lack of a complaint process when there is discrimination, whether it's by a teacher or a school resource officer, a police officer in the school. And they say, well, we need to tighten up the policy so that parents know how to file a complaint. Parents have been filing complaints. We do it all the time. These videos go viral even. The school district is made aware, but it's the lack of accountability on the other end. And so we have to both be upset when this happens, but be willing to stay organized and demand accountability and an end to the policies that are causing these discriminatory outcomes.
And these resources that we're talking about, they mention evidence-based approaches to effective school discipline policies. I know you've seen it all in this report, this resources. What exactly are they referring to here, and describe it?
Mhm.
Evidence-based approaches to, I mean, because the evidence, I mean, you just laid out the evidence that it's if you're a person of color, student of color, you're going to be discriminated against. You're
Yeah.
going to be unfairly suspended. You're going to be without evidence. So, what
Right.
is this evidence-based approach?
Well, this is the part of the problem with the guidance. So they call for responsive discipline. That's one thing. That is discipline that actually looks at the behaviors that are problematic. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's educate the student on the harm that comes from that behavior. And you're basically looking at discipline as another learning opportunity. The other way is punitive discipline by pushing them out of school or out of the classroom with in-school suspension, out of the school with out-of-school suspension, out of the school district with expulsion. We know those things are harmful and have those negative impacts that we mentioned. So they're encouraging districts not to do so. The problem is the actual enforcement of those things. And so a school district can create what we call a memorandum of understanding, an agreement with law enforcement, and says, hey, if you all are going to be in here in the school, you cannot participate in school discipline matters. You must stick to these higher things. Well, the police officers in the school ignore that written policy. They do what they want, and then there's absolutely no way a school district can even hold them accountable because their boss is the chief of police. So there's a lot of recommendations. There's a lot of recommendations in here that sound good on paper, but when the
Right.
school board can't do anything to an SRO, and vice versa, then these are simply words on paper. And we actually need to get to a point where the administration is encouraging people to end their relationships with law enforcement, encouraging them to invest in the resources necessary for restorative justice and other forms of effective response to student behaviors. Excuse me.
So, what's the path there? What does the advancement project suggest?
Mhm.
Because what you just said, obviously, um, spot on. We need that, but how do we get there?
All right. Well, I would encourage folks to look around in their communities to see what community organizations exist, to visit our website at policefreeschools.org. We support numerous or over 40, the National Campaign for Police Free Schools has over 40 organizations in it throughout the U.S. who are youth-led or parent-led, and they are all fighting to receive what we call a liberatory education, an education that affirms the youth of color who are attending those schools and does not utilize exclusionary discipline nor law enforcement, but instead helps create a community of care within each campus. So, we encourage people to really get active and to show up. A lot of the conservatives right now are looking at school board races as the place where they can really win and the place where they can really attack the gains that we've seen not just recently, but throughout the civil rights movement. They're taking away African American history. They're
Mhm.
taking away our ability to implement things that do not kick students out of school. At the state level, they're trying to take away our ability to even remove police from school. And yeah, they are attacking public education in a myriad of ways, and we know the role that public education has in the upward mobility of Black folks and our just simple dignity. So I think it's time for us to really pay attention to the school board, to the school board races, and to join a local organization so that you and your child can really speak truth to power and raise concerns about the issues that impact your family.
Yeah, because you mentioned something again very important, the school board, because we often talk about how I know I recently spoke about this too for myself. Growing up, I grew up in an area where when I was particularly elementary school, black teachers who looked like me, teachers who were really a part of the community, but with the way things are going today, even if you had that, this isn't the school boards taking teachers' ability to teach away, and when, especially think about critical race theory. You alluded to that. Aren't they taking the teacher's authority has just been stripped, hasn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. I remember I started off as an eighth grade social studies teacher, and that was really some of the fun and difficult part was piecing all these things together in a way that's not just palatable for your students, but really interesting, and that encourages the students to engage. Now we're saying take out the things that relate to them, take out anything that may counter our narrative of white supremacy, and then you teach that. And so if you're a young teacher of color and you're really passionate about the classroom, it's really a hard time out there now where you're not, for some teachers, you're not able to teach what you want to teach or how you like to teach it. You don't have the resources necessary. And then when something does happen in the school because of lack of resources, they just send in more police to handle the problem. So it is a very frustrating time, and I really encourage folks to get engaged in their school board races so that we can prevent this kind of nationwide attack on the education of Black people.
Yeah, and have the Advancement Project identified any legislators, politicians who have taken up the cause with you guys?
So we are a 501c3, and I will say there is the Counselors Not Criminalization Bill, which seeks to support efforts to end the school to prison pipeline and fund alternatives to exclusionary discipline and referrals to law enforcement. So that's at the federal level. It depends on what state you are, really, what the state level attacks are. And so, yeah, I can't get too specific with legislators so that I don't get myself in trouble.
No, we don't want that. And I want to go back. I alluded to a Brigham Young University report. One of the things that's highlighted in that report is that Black students tend to experience harsher disciplinary measures at higher rates than their peers in public schools in the United States. For example, Black students are 4 times, according to the Brigham Young study, 4 times more likely to experience suspension than their white peers. Again, you go in to the situation, you go into the school, and we're talking even kindergarten
Yeah.
children. So how do we fix this? I mean, you've given us some really good things that the Advancement Project, Tyler, is doing, but it seems like we need immediate fixes, though.
There definitely need to be some immediate fixes. I know we are currently in a teacher shortage, but at the
Mhm.
same time, if you are using certain language, if the numbers show that this particular teacher is suspending Black students and only Black students, and the same way we'd ask for somebody to be removed of their office for enforcing the law in a biased way, we also need to call for accountability when it comes to teachers and administrators and pay attention to that data. The federal guidance does talk about, some of the investigations do highlight the need for districts to always look at their data for racial disparities and even identify the schools and the specific teachers that are fueling these disparities, and then to remedy those issues that way. Once again, the issue with these findings and these settlements is that they're really not enforced. The enforcement mechanism would be for them to take the federal dollars away, which we know would just harm the Black students even more. So there's a lot of issues here. It's not clean cut, but we need the right people in the schools, and our schools need the resources to hire and sustain the employment of those people.
Yeah, the DOJ and the Department of Education in this these resources. They provided some fact sheets. One of them, supporting students' social, emotional, behavioral, and academic well-being and success. Um, through strategies for student and teacher support teams. But again, I want to just highlight a couple of those things there: social, emotional, behavioral. I mean, these things, when you are when you are being disciplined because perhaps you dropped a pencil during a test,
Mm-hmm.
because your cell phone buzzed during class, and the discipline is harsh. I mean, how do you assess a child? And you said earlier too. You said it earlier. When you're going to school, you're just developing
Yeah.
these things. So how is it that they can give us a so-called fact sheet that says that they want to support the social emotional behavior when they are um, seeing young kids being kicked out of school, losing? And there was another report of 1,000 days of schools, like black kids are losing several hundred of those thousands or something of that
Mm-hmm.
nature,
That's right.
due to suspensions and things like that. They are even trying to control that, it seems, Tyler, the
They are.
emotional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's so some of this stuff, there has been a lot of education research. We actually know what works. It just costs a lot. We know what, the indicators of a positive school climate that's safe, that's nurturing. It just costs a lot. And at the end of the day, so I think we need to look at our city budgets, our school budgets as moral documents and start investing in the things that work. There's a pathology out there that if you take away suspensions and expulsions, you take away a tool of the school to maintain control. Everything we mentioned today demonstrates that if it maintained control, it would have worked by now. Because so we know it doesn't maintain control. We know it's actually harmful in the long run of students, their families, and their communities. So it's really time for all of us to get on the same page with this. Sometimes there can be a disconnect also between older administrators and older teachers and the younger folks coming in who want to do some of this newer type of pedagogy, some of the newer discipline and classroom management techniques. So yeah, there's a lot of professional development that has to come in with that. And there's a lot of buy-in that everyone needs to have. A principal can say, hey, this is what we're doing this year. Everyone's got to buy in. Otherwise, those students that are in those classes where the teacher's continuing to use those old techniques that are continuing to have the same racially biased outcomes, if that person's still in there doing the same thing, then those students in that classroom are going to be at risk of experiencing this discrimination. So it really does take a concerted effort from the district level and down. I think it's crucial. And we need the states to stop taking away the ability of these districts to do things that they may see as progressive or they don't understand. But honestly, it's really outside of their expertise. And even outside of the population that voted them into that office. So there's clearly racial undertones to the things they're doing at the state level as well.
Tyler, tell us a little bit more about the Advancement Project, and tell us a little bit more about um, what other strategies that the Advancement Project may have to try and combat these things.
Absolutely. So the Advancement Project is a multiracial civil rights organization. We are based out of DC, but we are a national organization. We practice movement lawyering and support grassroots organizations throughout the United States who are fighting for their voting rights, who are fighting for educational justice, and who are fighting back against policing and the harms of the current criminal legal system. And so the program I work within is the Opportunity to Learn program. And what we're doing is, bringing organizations throughout the U.S. together so that we can create specific strategies to decriminalize the school building. There should be no way that fifth grader, that sixth grader who's just going through something is now has a felony or is in juvenile detention because they simply were experiencing adolescence. We want to deprioritize and really eliminate the use of law enforcement within schools because of the same negative outcomes with suspension and expulsions. They're just 3, 4, 5 times worse when we're talking about entering into the justice system. We want to demilitarize the school building. Why is it that Black and brown students walk into the school building with metal detectors, security cameras? They have to get a key. Maybe it's to go to the bathroom, and this section's locked, and that it really does resemble a prison or some sort of military base. And of course, that is not a great learning environment. Of course. And so then we may be experiencing, or school shootings happen, and across the board, really, in more white affluent schools, but our Black and brown schools are the ones that get the hardening. So that's got to stop. And also the surveillance of students throughout social media that is impacting the way they express themselves. Yeah, there's a long list of things. I encourage you all to go to policefreeschools.org.
Yeah.
And
But I want you to and please go to the website, folks. But I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because I think that also is something that folks are not really paying a lot of attention to, but it's happening on a grand scale. That monitoring of the social media of students. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how damaging that can be?
Right. So we're seeing an expansion in student surveillance across the board. In some places, they're saying, okay, after the murder of George Floyd, okay, we won't rely on police as much, but we'll do a lot of this surveillance here. And in other places, they're simply doing both. But it really hampers the students' ability to communicate and be themselves online. It criminalizes students for regular everyday behavior. And it is well known within law enforcement that the things that they find in social media monitoring are false hits. They say they're looking for things that may impact the school body, but when you search for bomb and students are talking about how food was bombed, or they're just having conversations amongst themselves, the AI that they're using and the people that are monitoring do not have the context or the cultural understanding to really know what they're reading. And what that leads to is greater contact with law enforcement and students, and even the disclosure of private, confidential records and information. And one last thing, since I have you here on the surveillance piece, now that in order to really receive a quality education, and especially in the time of COVID, we require those laptops, right? Whether the school gives you a laptop or you're taking your own laptop to school and you're signing on the Wi-Fi. We're at a point now where schools require you to sign over consent to search. Oh, wow. If you take this computer, we can search everything you do. We can look at anything we want to look at. If you log onto our Wi-Fi, we can go through whatever. We can survey whatever you're doing. Basically saying you give up that Fourth Amendment right as soon as you enter the school, just so you can learn. But also, if you're taking that computer home, they're also seeing what happens at home. There's been instances of a student that they attempted to expel because they saw a toy gun that the brother had. So we're just extending this same biased enforcement of laws and policies into the home now with these devices and with the level of student surveillance that's going on today.
So with that, it's one of those things that read everything before you sign it, right?
That's right. And that's right. If go through the code of conduct. If there's something that you're not comfortable with, then take it to the school and say that exactly that you aren't comfortable with it, that you don't want to sign it. And I honestly think if enough parents knew that because that code of conduct book, look, I used to teach. I know half of those signatures. They just do it to get the quick 100 and go on about the day. I get it.
Right.
But if especially Black parents knew what they were signing with regards to giving up their child's ability to have any privacy while they're online, and even giving up their ability to have privacy while that device is in their house, I think Black folks coming together just saying we're not doing that. So yeah, you have a school that's 97% Black. You get enough parents in there to say we're not doing that,
right?
Or a school district that's majority, basically coming together, organizing around the surveillance piece and saying we're not having it, making them go back to the drawing board. Last thing about the surveillance is that it's extremely expensive. Millions of dollars, and it takes time for someone to go monitor. This is all money that could be spent on the resources for students, the mental health, the smaller class sizes. Can we bring in a dentist one day? Can we put a washer and dryer in the back? All these things we could do at a school, but we want to look at and see what they're doing online. So I'll get off my soapbox with that one.
No, once again, give that website again, Tyler.
Policefreeschools.org.
And what can folks do to support not just that, but the advancement project as a whole?
Absolutely. Well, of course, you could always donate. Your dollars go to a really great cause and lifting up the voice of youth and parents who are harmed, whether it's through the education system or through law enforcement. Um, And again, so I would take a look at that website too and see if there's an organization within your city, whether you're in DC, if you're in Arizona, you're in Denver, we're out there too, Miami. So if there's an organization that's in your city on that website, feel free to reach out. We can try to make that connection with you so you can get engaged in some movement building work in your local community.
And finally, Tyler, with all we've discussed, it comes back to this for me, the parents. What recommendations does the Advancement Project give for parents, particularly parents of color who mostly disproportionately, as we say, deal with these things?
For one, is to really listen to your students. They know what to your youth, to your children, they know what they need. Um, Oftentimes we can be hard on them and automatically think that whatever the school said they did. Listen to your child. It oftentimes is not the case, or there's a larger issue. Always fight for your child when it comes to suspensions and expulsions. Try to get it off of their record. If they're referred to law enforcement, try to make sure that they don't actually go all the way into the system. Feel free. You can use that website too to reach out to us if there's any incident related to a SRO in school. But we're more than happy to hear incidents of that you think are biased and just racist within your school district. So we'll do our best to, if we can't do anything about it, try to connect you with a local advocate who can help. So just keep fighting and don't take what the school districts say at face value, knowing that there's typically a way for your child to get back in that classroom and for them to stop doing this to our Black children.
Tyler Whittenberg, the Deputy Director of Opportunity to Learn for the Advancement Project's National Office. Tyler, we really appreciate you joining the Black Press. Let it be known today.
I appreciate you having me. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
All right now.